true believers, and welcome back to another episode of Tier Talk, the series where I go over media franchises old and new to rate them based on my own experiences and preferences before your very eyes. As always, if you find this video entertaining, let me know with a big ol' thumbs up. And consider hitting the subscribe button for more geeky content from the Northeast's biggest nerdy stuff lover. Without further ado, let's jump right into this list, starting with today's topic of conversation, the Kingdom Hearts video game franchise. Now, growing up, there were a few video games that had as meaningful an impact on me like that of Kingdom Hearts. These games came out at just the right time for me, as I was wading through who I was personally and discovering the things that made me That and they combined two of my favorite things, role-playing games and animated Disney shows. There's a lot of magic in the very bones of this franchise, and as time went on, each game provided different things. The worlds got bigger and more intricate, the characters got older and more complex, and that series-spanning narrative got so dang complicated. With this recent dry spell in the franchise, I've played each game multiple times, so I figured it was about time to rank them after all this time. Just remember, this entire list and the things I'm about to say are my opinion, so if there's a part of this video where you agree or disagree more, try not to roast me too hard in the comments. Or go ahead and do it anyway, I don't really give a darn. Discussion is discussion. And with that, let's just get right into it, starting with the first entry on this list, the self-titled debut game of the original Kingdom Hearts. Okay, so the original Kingdom Hearts, the very first one, Kingdom Hearts 1, is super duper special. Like, incredibly special. This is the game that literally started it all. It was the brainchild of a couple of Japanese game developers pitched to a Disney executive in an elevator. That is so crazy. That's such a crazy origin story. The game itself is fantastic. It's probably one of the better examples of a 3D platformer action game on the PlayStation 2. Square-Enix has always been really good at presentation and making their games look shiny. So of course the cutscenes and the animations were pretty good. Character models look appropriate, for what they're trying to emulate from 2D Disney animated movies. And the casting is also really good. One thing that I can commend a lot of Kingdom Hearts games for is the impersonations of the Disney characters. Not every Disney character in a Kingdom Hearts game is actually voiced by the person who voiced them in their show or in their movie. So to hear the sound of, somebody trying to emulate Robin Williams is like really cool. That being said, there are still some things that are a little clunky about that OG first game. The first thing I'm going to point out is always the camera. The camera sucks in Kingdom Hearts 1. I don't like that you can't use it with the right analog stick. I don't like that it navigates the command window instead. And being just right up close to Sora's butt only works in certain circumstances. It's also incredibly confusing to get started. I don't know how many of you guys had this problem when you were kids, but because I took the questions literally, at the beginning they're supposed to set like how fast you level and how strong you are right off the bat, but that's not how I saw them. I always just answered them literally, and then sometimes the games was just super hard. It's pretty great. The first Kingdom Hearts is awesome. I love it very much. The soundtrack slaps. The voice acting is pretty on point. The character design is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and put the first Kingdom Hearts game in a solid B, just because the only problems I have with it are the limited functionality that they had for when they were discovering stuff on the PS2. And now you guys have probably noticed this right off the bat here, but there's actually a couple of tiles for the same games, and that's because these are the final mix versions. For those of you who don't know, in most standard versions of Kingdom Hearts games, there is a typical release, which was released to the public. That's kind of like its version 1. And then sometime later, they would re-release the game with additional mechanics and features put in. Specifically in Kingdom Hearts 1, 2 Birth by Sleep, these features were put into their games. Kingdom Hearts 3 later got a DLC called Remind, which did sort of the same thing, but it's a DLC, not a re-release. So Kingdom Hearts 1 Final Mix added a couple of things. It added some new weapons, it added some new secret boss fights, it recolored all the skins for the Heartless in the games, and it adjusted some difficulty tweaks, like strength gains and enemy health and stuff like that. The only thing I don't like about the Final Mix re-release, and that is that all of the Heartless skins are recolored, and some of them work really good, and some of them just don't. Otherwise, this game is just a slightly more balanced version of Kingdom Hearts 1. My major issues with the game are still there. I'm going to put it on the same tier as B, but I'm going to put it higher on the list than the first Kingdom Hearts. Now next, this is an error on my part. I should have put 2 Chain of Memories tiles, because technically there's 2 versions of Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, but we're going to judge the Recom version instead of the Game Boy version. So for those of you that don't know, I'll just reiterate this as well. There are 2 versions of Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. The Game Boy Advance was the handheld version of this game, and then later, after I believe it was Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, they remade Chain of Memories with a PS2 port. That's called Chain of Memories, so Recom. I'm going to be talking about the Recom version just because there's barely like a difference here. For me, Chain of Memories is just complicated. Like, this is one of the most stereotypical things out there. If you ask people what their least favorite Kingdom Hearts game is, it's either going to be Chain of Memories or Dream Drop Distance. And I'll get into Dream Drop Distance a little bit later. But Chain of Memories is a card-based, not exactly turn, but it's like a strategy game where you still get to free roam. You still get to advance through a stage, unlocking levels, solving puzzles, and defeating Heartless and bosses. Except everything that you do to interact with anything is done through a card system. So like, in order to swing an attack, you need to use a card with a value on it. And if you want to beat a boss, you need to outmaneuver your opponent by playing cards with better values, just using strategic numbers when your opponent uses numbers of a certain value too. It's interesting, it's really creative, and I think for being the handheld version pulls it off way better, because as a 3D platforming action game, that kind of system kind of falls apart, especially if it's not like turn-based or something like Midnight Suns. Marvel's Midnight Suns does that concept where it's like a card game, but the fact that it's actually like turn-based, so that way you can like plan moves instead of trying to do everything on the fly, just benefits that game way well. I'm going to throw Chain of Memories on the D tier. It's a high D, low C for the handheld version, but the PS2 version just sucks. I don't like Chain of Memories much. Next, we're going to talk about what's pretty widely received to be the best game in the franchise, or at the very least, the game that everybody can agree had the most right. Kingdom Hearts 2 was pretty definitive for its time. With the only 3 games, like in the back in the day, Chain of Memories was just considered to be like a side story. Like, things happened and they were canonical in the story, bridging the gap between 1 and 2. But anything that like you needed to know was kind of explained in Kingdom Hearts 2, so you didn't necessarily have to play Chain of Memories to play 2. But it definitely fucking helped, because Kingdom Hearts 2 is so saturated with its own lore already. Like, way back in the day, this game talked about itself and its moving pieces all the fucking time. Major criticisms for this game were the level design and the reaction command system. And, you know, the level design aspect I can kind of see. Like, there's a few levels that you can tell, a few worlds that you can tell that were just loved more than others in this game. Levels like the Pirates of the Caribbean, Agrabah, and even Beast Castle were like pretty great, because they had an interesting map to navigate, and there was always something happening. You couldn't always just go in a straight line. You had to like go around corners and bob and weave. There was some verticality. But then levels like the Savannah for the Lion King and Mulan's world for the Land of Dragons, those were just really big, flat, open territories, and there wasn't a whole lot to do with them. That being said, the narrative in Kingdom Hearts 2 is like the best. The combat in Kingdom Hearts 2 is the best. I don't care what anybody has to say. You can call me a fanboy. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care. To me, Kingdom Hearts 2 is probably the best game in the franchise, and it's not even like a long shot. There's so much they did right with this game. I'm going to put Kingdom Hearts 2 base in the A tier, and I'll explain why just that in a second here. Because again, we have to talk about a final mix version of a video game. So the major changes for Kingdom Hearts 2 in the final mix version were actually pretty significant, because a lot of people complained about how easy the game was even in Proud mode. And so for the first time in the series history, we got the implementation of critical mode. And critical mode basically changes everything about the game. It makes it so that your health only gets to a certain point, and there's a no XP ability given, so that way you can run it at level 1 for the whole game, which is insane. They implemented a few new boss battles and some extra mini games to complete, and then there's an entirety of a dungeon that they implemented in the Hollow Bastion world and the hub world of Kingdom Hearts 2 that just slaps. It's everybody's favorite thing about Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. They also did the whole reskinning all of the Heartless thing, and again, I could take it or leave it. Some of them look better, some of them don't really have much wrong with them, but there is some weird ones in there. Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix is the best Kingdom Hearts game, hands down. Like, there are games on this list that have really good storytelling. I really love the way that the first game handles its narrative. I really love the characters in 358 over 2 days. And I really love the command deck system and melding and all of that stuff from Birth by Sleep. But Kingdom Hearts 2 is such a slap in the face compared to the rest of those games. It is by far like the best character growth, the bad guy team organization 13's best iteration. I love everything about Kingdom Hearts 2. Everything except for some of the flat level design, and motherfucker, I hate doing Atlantica. Every time that I play Kingdom Hearts 2, I hate doing Atlantica. But those are just gripes that I have with, like, personally, and they're not even that bad. So, 358 over 2 days. 358 over 2 is probably the point in the Kingdom Hearts like development lore where stuff starts to fall apart. There was a time after Kingdom Hearts 2's publishing that nobody really knew where they were going with the franchise. There was a secret ending, if you got to see it in Kingdom Hearts 2, that showed Terra, Aqua, and Ventus from Birth by Sleep fighting with Master Xehanort and Vanitas, but that was kind of, again, just like a last-ditch effort sort of thing, in case that they managed to get another sequel out of the game. 358 over 2 days, Birth by Sleep, and Recoded kind of fit into this weird square where, kind of fit into this weird spot where they wanted to take the game in a direction, they just didn't know what story to tell yet. The main studio was on a break, and so a different studio handled the development of these games. 358 over 2 days is a DS game, and it's a prequel game to Kingdom Hearts 2, but kind of a sequel in a way to Chain of Memories. Roxas is the main character, and Axel and his relationship is explored in this game along with a new character, Xion, but because Xion was nowhere to be found in Kingdom Hearts 2, they kind of had to find a way to get rid of her, and it just kind of gives you a little bit more insight into Roxas's side of the story, which we only got a glimpse into through Kingdom Hearts 2. The game is played with a mission structure, which is pretty fun. It's a DS game, so you have to be able to like start and stop what you're doing pretty quickly, and the game is hard as shit. I played the game maybe like 2 or 3 times. Like by myself, I have played it 2 or 3 times, and I've only beaten it once because after a certain point, my patience with the mission structure thing and the weird difficulty spike like halfway through the game, after those 2 things for me personally, it kind of loses its glimmer. Like, I like the storyline. The storyline is great, and the characters are awesome. Unfortunately, it's also a DS game, and we really didn't get to see any heavy-duty voice work done in the game until they did the HD remaster where they remade cutscenes in the 3D engine. I'm going to throw 358 over 2 days in the C territory just because I think being a DS game just inherently limits it to what it's capable of. By no means is it a bad game, it's just kind of a meh Kingdom Hearts game. And the conversation kind of carries the same weight in the next game and a half here. We're going to talk about Birth by Sleep. Birth by Sleep is so aggravating to me because I used to love Birth by Sleep. My parents, for my birthday, got me, I had a PSP already, and when I found out that a Kingdom Hearts game was coming out on it, I told them that's what I wanted, and I believe it was for my birthday that year that my mom handed me the game. I still have the box art, came with like a cardboard sleeve and the case was inside of it, so it was like a really cool, really awesome thing to like hold in my hand, and I played that game all the goddamn time. When I found out that there was a multiplayer element to it, I would go to school with my PSP in my bag and like tell my friends about it. And I convinced two of my friends to pick up a copy of Birth by Sleep, and we played the Mirage Arena on the bus ride and in our study halls. And it was awesome. Those days were so cool and fun. The story is also really interesting because the game has 3 protagonists, so you get to kind of see each player picking up the pieces and treading their own path, interacting with the same and also different characters. The concept is really great, but the execution kind of sucks. The storyline is like super basic. The main plot of the game is the bad guy is manipulating 3 friends into fighting each other so that way he can use them to kind of spark a war, or to, I guess, create an apocalypse scenario so that way he can benefit from it in some way, I guess. And because it's a prequel game, it takes place 10 years before the first game. None of the characters, except for like the few mainstays like Mickey, end up in future games for a time. So, of course, it's just a sad game by the end of it. Characters and bad things happen to them. And the level design kind of falls flat because it's a PSP game. They were allowed to use different Disney properties to kind of help push them. The original Renaissance classics like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White. But the levels themselves were just flat as fuck, man. Like, they had really big, wide open rooms, and every time you got into a room, you'd button mash the shit out of like a group of enemies, and then you just have to walk to the other side of the map for something to happen. The original Birth by Sleep is probably just a C tier, just like 358, because while it has some redeeming qualities, it's just not very great to play in the long term. Now, thankfully, they did manage to push a final mix version of Birth by Sleep, which fixes some issues that I have. There's a epilogue story that gets added that kind of adds a little bit more challenge and depth to one of the characters that admittedly had a little bit less going for them than the other two. So Terra and Ventus felt really important for like the whole story. Aqua didn't really so much until like the very end, which sucks. The level design is still just as bad, though they did add a few things like additional mini games and some collection mechanics to kind of make you explore the world a little bit more, to kind of hang out with them. And because they added an additional difficulty as well, it made you want to play with these characters more, like level them so that way they actually like felt good when you played them. The epilogue campaign for Aqua really saves Birth by Sleep for me. The game is still pretty short, like you could complete each story in maybe like 8 to 10 hours, and so you're playing maybe like high 20s, and the additional Aqua campaign just adds to that. I will place the final mix version of Birth by Sleep in the B tier because it does add some longevity and some additional bug fixes. It feels a little bit more balanced, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The experience as a whole is just better in the final mix version, but it still has most of the same flaws, notably in all of the goddamn empty rooms in this game. Next, we're going to talk about Coded, and I guess I need to explain this a little bit too, because it kind of skews my judgment of Coded a little bit. So Coded was released 3 times. The original Coded was made for a cell phone mobile distribution in only certain parts of the world. So it was a very basic, like, jump around in a level kind of game that had almost no depth to it. And you got to play as Sora again, which was pretty hype after playing 3 games that like Sora wasn't the main character on. After the game came out and it was revealed that like there's an ending sequence that has some story significance because it references characters in other games, they decided they were going to re-release Coded, except from the ground up as a complete remake for the Nintendo DS. So enter Recoded, which is a top to bottom remake that actually has some functionality as a 3D platformer, a puzzle solver, and an action game. And it's actually a half decent mobile game. Like between all of the game, like I have the most fun playing Birth by Sleep, but the structure and the leveling system in Recoded is actually pretty good. You can tell that they put some thought into it to make it a better game. When they were porting to then modern consoles on the PS3, PS4 era, they decided that they were going to give Coded the 358 treatment, and they just remade all the cutscenes with some additional action sequences so that way Sora got to use some of the combat moves that he could use in the game. So this has 3 different iterations, and I'm mainly judging it on being Recoded the DS game because that's what I've played. I'm going to put this game in the B category because the game is fun to play. Like if I were to choose, the playing structure is going to be Birth by Sleep, Recoded I should say, and then 358 because it's fun to play as a MOBA game overall. That's kind of just like all I have to say about Coded. So now we're going to talk about the game that everybody kind of faults the Kingdom Hearts series for where it started to jump the shark. So the last couple of games that came out in order, that being 358, Birth by Sleep, and Coded, were kind of hinting that something big was coming. They were saying that like there is a story that is still going on here, and we're showing you like the puzzle pieces, and the next game that comes out is going to actually push the narrative forward, and that was Dream Drop Distance. So this game came out for the 3DS. Dream Drop Distance had some pretty interesting features. It introduced a form of traversal known as flow motion, which let the player kind of fling themselves off of like light poles or just hitting walls and bouncing off of them, really trying to utilize the 3DS's gyroscope to do cool shit. Now, where this game falls apart is that it kind of has the same issues playing the game that Birth by Sleep has, in that the rooms are just wide fucking open, and there ends up not being a whole lot to do as you play the game. So like you can get around by using flow motion, but what they do to make sure that you're still fighting enemies is placing them immediately when you start moving through an area, and then like on the other side of the area before the exit, they'll just throw a group of enemies down and make you fight them. It's also not like an overly complicated game. Like despite all of the stuff that came before with the leveling structure from Recoded and the command melding system in Birth by Sleep, in order to level up your commands, you had to like get a partner from one of the creatures in this game, and when you spent time with them they leveled up, and that's what gave you like additional stat boosts and attacks and stuff like that. So the movie roster for the games themselves are pretty great. The levels were kind of they have Birth by Sleep syndrome, and the mechanics were fairly easy to understand. The narrative itself is dog water. They made so many weird decisions that like undermined all of the weight behind the previous games. Specifically Kingdom Hearts 2, Dream Drop Distance undoes a lot of stuff that was resolved in Kingdom Hearts 2, and for that I kind of can't forgive it, because there are some days where I just like wish that the Kingdom Hearts franchise ended with 2. But there's still a lot of things to like about it. I think I'll put Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance in the C category, and we'll just kind of wish that game never existed. So the next one is going to be kind of hard to talk about because it's a mobile game. Honestly, it's just really hard for me to talk about Kingdom Hearts Key because there's just so many additional steps to the whole thing. Like, if you want to know anything about Key, you need to basically watch somebody's YouTube video on it now. Because while the mobile game had like good intentions of trying to show you like the first everything about Kingdom Hearts Key, they also decided to use the whole setup as a way to create additional story elements for them to introduce in modern games, if that makes any sense. Like, Kingdom Hearts Key was just supposed to be a fun multiplayer experience that people could play if they wanted to participate in some of the lore that they talked about in Birth by Sleep. But then it like slowly evolved into something else. Like, they started focusing on characters that had no place whatsoever in the modern games, like in Sora's era, and then suddenly they have all the weight of the world pressed on them by the third game. So the game came out in segments and was slowly pushed to being defunct after only a few years. And it has like different story arcs that you have to watch in a specific order. It makes up additional lore and terms that you need to know, which has huge implications for future games that just haven't really been touched upon yet. But there's a lot of importance on Kingdom Hearts Key's narrative, and while playing the games was like kind of fun, I'm just sad that like in order to understand things that are about to happen, you need to know lore from these mobile games that you can't just play by yourself and like easily analyze anymore. Like, you have to watch somebody break it down on a YouTube video, which kind of sucks. I'm going to place the Key series as a franchise in the D tier because while it was flashy and kind of fun, and I only played the game when it was Union Key, like I didn't play Dark Road, I didn't play Key in the original, so this game isn't really like special to me, but I can understand if you did like this game, good for you. It's just, I really wish I didn't have to talk about this game. Next, we're going to talk about Birth by Sleep 0.2 Fragmentary Passage. I'm just going to call this game Fragmentary Passage from now on. Fragmentary Passage is basically a glorified tech demo. So at the end of Birth by Sleep Final Mix, you play an epilogue story as Aqua where she gets trapped in the realm of darkness, which is basically just like, it's like her purgatory. She can't easily escape it. It's like being sent to another country without a visa, and she can't get out. So it's just kind of her time down there. And there have been so many games on mobile devices that Square-Enix was looking to create a new game on modern consoles like the PS4 and Xbox One, but they hadn't played with any engines yet. So when they first dived into Unreal Engine 4, I think, they needed to see what the hardware was capable of, and so they decided to make a post-epilogue that would lead into the events of Kingdom Hearts 3. And that's what Fragmentary Passage is. All of the mechanics that are present in Kingdom Hearts 3 basically have their roots in Fragmentary Passage, except you play as Aqua instead of Sora. So by itself, it's really short and it's really flashy. It's fun, but you kind of scratch your head wondering why you're playing it after a few hours. Because while there are a few cute references, like you find out that Aqua was actually there when Sora and King Mickey sealed the door at the end of the first Kingdom Hearts game, that's kind of just like, that's just it. That's like the whole point of telling this story, is so that way you know Aqua's still alive, you know Ven's still sleeping, you know Terra is still under the control of Xehanort, and you know that King Mickey had his shirt blasted off by darkness. I'm gonna put this game in the C tier because it's fun to play. It's not that long. Alright, Kingdom Hearts 3. Kingdom Hearts 3, for me personally, is super hard to talk about because the time spent between Kingdom Hearts 2 and the release of Kingdom Hearts 3 was basically just being passed around for obligatory side stories that on the surface you would think didn't really have anything to do with adding anything to the narrative, at least until Dream Drop Distance. And then everything started to cascade because Dream Drop Distance fucked everything up. So the hype for Kingdom Hearts 3 upon its release was crazy, and everybody had different expectations. There were so many people who were hyping this game up to be like the savior of the franchise. They thought that this would be the game to like end all fantasy games. For me, I just wanted to know why things were still being pushed forward when there was like a nice bow that was wrapped on things at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2. So I was really hoping that it would open the door for a new saga in a nice, interesting way. But what Kingdom Hearts 3 ended up doing was adding additional layers and making everything seem that since the very first game, everything else on this list was intended from the beginning to all correlate and connect to each other, like this is the end of the road where it's always been. And when you play Kingdom Hearts 3, when it finally came out and you got your hands on it, you realize that that is easier said than done. Playing Kingdom Hearts 3 is fun. The levels are huge. There's so much detail. There's actually like talking and vibrant worlds and NPCs. And being in Kingdom Hearts 3 is fun. But the narrative of this game fucks everything up. It is not great to sit and watch cutscenes where characters behave in ways that they don't or previously haven't behaved before, and you wonder if they truly would have made those decisions if this game had come out 10 years before it actually had. The story ends up in a pretty funny place. Xehanort gets a redemption arc that I don't think he deserved, and we ended up where like everything, literally everything was good. Everything was fine. And then they made Sora go away, which kind of like is supposed to open the door for future games. I don't know if it's going to actually work out in their favor. Kingdom Hearts 3 was fine. I just don't think it had a lot of focus, and it didn't have a lot of satisfying answers. I'm going to put Kingdom Hearts 3 in the C tier because while the game is fun to play to an extent, I have a whole video coming out about Kingdom Hearts 3, but to an extent, Kingdom Hearts 3 is fun to play. The worlds and level design is immaculate. To me, the narrative and the way characters are written just makes this game so much worse. And finally, we get to talk about Melody of Memory. The Melody of Memory is interesting because, again, it's a title that came out and has significant lore importance, but it doesn't really dip its toes into that very much. The game takes place after Kingdom Hearts 3 and is basically Kairi as a character trying to figure out where Sora possibly could have gone, and she does this by exploiting her connection to Sora as a Princess of Heart and is trying to find a memory somewhere that might lead to a hint as to where he's been vanished to. So it's a rhythm game. There's level progression, but there isn't a map for the character to walk along. You kind of just visit a theme, and then there's music tracks available, and then you perform actions on the track to the rhythm of the song, which is very interesting, and it's probably one of the few directions I did not expect Kingdom Hearts to go. Like every iteration of Kingdom Hearts here is an action game. Like even Chain of Memories, which is a card strategy game, is still a 3D or a sprite-based action game where you run around and hit shit. Melody of Memory is that, like you still hit stuff, but the only way you succeed is by listening to music and performing rhythmic actions, which is really interesting. And like it's an anomaly in the rest of this franchise. I like that it exists. I like that it's unapologetic about its presentation. To me, it just kind of like the only thing that matters again in this game, it's got coded syndrome, where like everything in this game doesn't matter until the final like 2 hours. So it develops Kairi as a person, which is what we should have gotten in 3, but that's not what happened. I like Melody of Memory, but again, compared to the stuff on this list, it's not that great. I'm going to again put this game in the C tier because there is good things about it, but there could be so much more. And that's kind of just like Kingdom Hearts lately, I guess. All right, everybody, there you go. Let's have a look-see at this sucker right here. This is my Kingdom Hearts game tier list, and some of these might be like kind of obvious, like duh, like some of these may be kind of cookie cutter lukewarm takes, but this is honestly like what's in my heart. Ha ha ha. Hearts. That's like the second pun I made unintentionally. These are the places, I think the only one I would change. Now that I'm like staring at it with everything put together, I'm going to put the final mix version of Kingdom Hearts 1 in the A tier because that first game is still such a goddamn classic. It has some of the best fights, it has some of the best character design, and some of the best level design in the whole series, and I think it deserves its place there. That's the only retroactive take I would make is that. And otherwise, I'm pretty happy with this. Obviously, like I'm pretty adamant in my placement for Kingdom Hearts 2. I do think that it is the best game in the franchise narratively and gameplay wise, and I have strong feelings about it. And maybe you'll learn a little bit more when I finally get that Kingdom Hearts 3 video out, which is coming soon. I just want to formulate my thoughts clearly on that so you guys can understand it better. And yeah, that's just about it. Do you guys agree or disagree with my list? Let me know in the comments below. I definitely would like to have a conversation, get some chatter started up around this game before I actually make that Kingdom Hearts 3 video. Where would you guys have ranked the games yourselves? Do you think that there's a game on this list that deserves to be higher or lower? Is there an underrated title, and do you think there's any overrated titles? Definitely let me know. Let's talk about it in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Don't forget to be awesome, be kind, and rewind, and I'll see you in the next one. Excelsior!